The emergency alarm echoed through the massive chamber of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 47 different species rushed to their seats, their various forms of movement creating a chaotic symphony of sounds. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few slithered across the polished floor. The great dome above them displayed a horrifying sight. Entire star systems going dark, one after another, like lights being switched off across the galaxy. Ambassador Quelon of the Zerathian Empire stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing frantically at the holographic display. His blue skin had turned pale with fear, and his voice carried the weight of desperation. He had called this emergency session, and everyone knew why. The Vrexian swarm had come, and they were unstoppable. 300 billion souls, Kellen said, his voice breaking. Gone. Consumed. The Vrexian swarm has destroyed 12 civilizations in just 2 months. Our projections show they will reach the core systems within a year if we do not stop them here. The holographic display shifted to show the Kelrath system, a modest collection of 4 planets orbiting a yellow sun. The insectoid Kelrath had been members of the Council for over 2 centuries, peaceful traders and artists who had never raised weapons against anyone. Now their system stood directly in the path of the swarm, and everyone in the chamber knew what that meant. Ambassador Thalessa of the Kelrath delegation stepped forward, her translucent wings trembling. She was small compared to most species in the chamber, barely reaching the height of a human child, but her voice was steady. We have begun evacuations, but we cannot save everyone. We have 6 billion citizens across our worlds. The swarm will reach us in 1 week. We are asking for help. The chamber erupted in discussion. Every species present understood the implications. The Kelrath system was the gateway to the inner territories. If it fell, dozens of other systems would follow. This was where they had to make their stand, no matter the cost. Fleet Admiral Corvin of the United Defense Coalition stood next, his massive reptilian form casting shadows across the floor. He had commanded fleets for over 60 years and had never lost a major engagement. But his voice held no confidence as he spoke. We have assembled the largest combined fleet in Council history. 3,000 warships from 23 different species. Every vessel we can spare without leaving our home systems defenseless. We will meet the swarm at Kelrath Prime and hold the line. The display showed the fleet composition. Dreadnoughts from the Zerathian Empire, fast attack cruisers from the Pelian Confederacy, carrier groups from the Netherian Collective, and dozens of other ship classes from across the galaxy. It was an impressive sight, a testament to galactic unity in the face of extinction, but everyone had seen the intelligence reports. The Vrexian swarm that destroyed the last system had numbered over 10,000 bioships, and they were growing with each world they consumed. Projected casualties? Someone asked from the back of the chamber. Corvin's silence spoke volumes before he finally answered. 40 to 60% of our fleet, perhaps more. The swarm does not retreat, does not negotiate, and does not stop. They will throw everything at us, and we will have to destroy every single one of their ships to survive. The chamber fell silent. 40 to 60% meant thousands of ships destroyed, hundreds of thousands of crew members dead. But what choice did they have? Behind the Kelrath system lay the heart of galactic civilization. If they did not stop the swarm here, billions more would die. That was when Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran United Nations stepped forward. She was human, a species that had joined the Galactic Council only 30 years ago. Most of the older species still viewed humans as newcomers, children playing at galactic politics. They were a strange species from a heavy-gravity world called Earth, known more for their odd sense of humor and persistence than for any great military achievement. Chen walked to the podium with measured steps, her gray uniform crisp and clean. She was middle-aged by human standards, with short dark hair streaked with silver and calm brown eyes that seemed to take in everything. She waited for the chamber to quiet before speaking. The Terran United Nations has reviewed the tactical situation, she said, her voice clear and steady. We will deploy military assets to support the defense of the Kelrath system. A murmur of appreciation went through the chamber. Despite being relative newcomers, the humans were offering to fight alongside the other species. It was a noble gesture, even if most expected their contribution to be minimal. Humanity had never deployed their military in a major galactic conflict before. No one really knew what they were capable of. How many ships will Earth send? Corvin asked, already making mental calculations about where to place the human vessels in his battle formations. Chen looked directly at him, her expression unchanging. One ship. The UHNS Indomitable will arrive in 72 hours. The chamber exploded. Voices raised in disbelief, anger, and confusion created a wall of sound that took several minutes to die down. One ship? The humans were sending a single ship to face the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Quellen was the first to recover his voice. Admiral Chen, surely you misunderstood the question. We asked how many ships your government will contribute to the defense fleet. I understood perfectly, Chen replied. One ship. The Indomitable will be sufficient for our role in the operation. Sufficient? Quellon's voice rose to a shout. We face annihilation and you mock us with a single vessel? Is this how Little Earth values its allies? Other voices joined in. Ambassador Prell of the Netherian Collective, who had worked closely with human diplomats for years, looked personally hurt. Sarah, we have been friends. Our peoples have built strong bonds. Why does Earth abandon us now in our darkest hour? Even Thalessa, who had remained composed throughout the crisis, seemed on the verge of tears. Please, Admiral Chen. We are begging for our lives, for our children. How can one ship make any difference? Chen waited for the noise to die down again. She did not look angry or defensive, just patient, like a teacher waiting for students to finish asking questions before providing an answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but somehow carried to every corner of the vast chamber. The Indomitable will arrive in 72 hours and will take position at the front of the defensive line. We will engage the swarm's vanguard. I suggest the rest of the fleet maintains supporting positions and prepares to secure the perimeter once we have dealt with the initial assault. Once you have dealt with it? Corvin's laugh was bitter. Admiral, I have fought in 18 major fleet actions. I have commanded thousands of ships. I am telling you, as someone who respects Earth and its people, one ship cannot face the swarm. You will be destroyed in minutes, and we will lose valuable assets that could be used elsewhere. Please reconsider this decision. Chen shook her head slowly. The decision is final. One ship. That is what we are sending, because that is what the situation requires. I understand your skepticism, but I ask you to trust us. We have reviewed every engagement the swarm has fought. We know what we are facing. Then you know you are sending your crew to their deaths. Quillon shouted. No, Chen said quietly. I know we are sending them to war. There is a difference. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. At the door she paused and looked back. The Indomitable will arrive on schedule. Captain Rivera is one of our finest officers and her crew is ready. I suggest you prepare your fleets and trust that humanity knows what it is doing. Then she was gone, leaving behind a chamber full of confused, angry, and frightened representatives. They had faced the end of civilization and asked for help, and humanity had answered with what seemed like either supreme arrogance or cruel indifference. One ship. As the council dissolved into heated arguments about what to do with the humans' insulting contribution, none of them stopped to ask the most important question. Why would a species send only one ship unless that one ship was enough? The combined galactic defense fleet assembled at Kelrath Prime looked like a floating city of metal and light. 3,000 warships from 24 different species formed defensive formations that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. Each vessel represented the pinnacle of its civilization's technology and military engineering. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons bristled with weapons. Carrier groups launched thousands of fighter craft. Destroyer squadrons weaved through the formations like schools of predatory fish. Fleet Admiral Corvin sat in the command center of his flagship, the Zorathian dreadnought Eternal Vigilance, studying tactical displays with growing dread. Intelligence reported the approaching Rexian swarm had grown even larger than expected. 15,000 bioships moving as one enormous organism across the void. His best strategists estimated the fleet had perhaps a 40% chance of stopping them, and that estimate assumed everything went perfectly. It would not go perfectly. It never did. Status of all vessels? He asked his operations officer. All ships report ready, Admiral. We have confirmed firing solutions for primary and secondary targets. Point defense systems are online. Fighter squadrons are deployed. We are as ready as we will ever be. Corvin nodded slowly. He had said goodbye to his family before leaving for this mission. His daughter had cried, understanding without being told that her father might not return. He had told her he was fighting so she could grow up in a safe galaxy. Now looking at the tactical display, he wondered if he had lied to her. Time until the swarm arrives? 90 minutes, sir. And Admiral, we are receiving a transmission. The human vessel has arrived. Every screen in the command center shifted to show a single point of light emerging from faster-than-light space. For a moment it was just a dot, no different than a distant star. Then the sensors began processing the data, and Corvin felt his breath catch in his throat. The human ship was massive, 5 kilometers from bow to stern, 2 kilometers across at its widest point. It dwarfed every other vessel in the fleet, including Corvin's own dreadnought. The hull was dark gray, almost black, and covered with what sensors identified as weapon emplacements. Hundreds of them. Thousands. The ship looked less like a vessel and more like a weapon that someone had attached engines to. Designation confirmed, the communications officer said, her voice barely above a whisper. UHNS Indomitable, United Humanity Naval Ship. She is hailing us, Admiral. On screen, Corvin said. The view screen showed a human woman in her mid-40s wearing a crisp black uniform with silver trim. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe style and her gray eyes were calm and alert. Captain Rivera, according to the identification tag that appeared below her image. Fleet Admiral Corvin, this is Captain Elena Rivera of the Indomitable. We have arrived as scheduled and are ready to take our position. Corvin studied her for a moment, trying to read something in her expression. Confidence? Certainly. Arrogance? Perhaps fear? If it was there, he could not see it. Captain Rivera, welcome to the Kelrath system. We have prepared a position for your vessel in the 3rd defensive line, where you can provide support fire and— Negative, Admiral, Rivera interrupted politely but firmly. We will be taking position at the front of the defensive formation. Transmitting coordinates now. The tactical display updated and Corvin felt anger flash through him. The coordinates placed the Indomitable several 100,000 kilometers ahead of the fleet, directly in the path of the swarm's approach. Captain, that position places you in the initial contact zone. You will face the full force of the swarm's first assault alone. Your ship, however impressive, cannot withstand. With respect, Admiral, we know what we are doing. The Indomitable will engage the swarm's vanguard. We request that your fleet maintain supporting positions and prepare to engage targets that break through our line. Targets that break through their line? Corvin wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Wanted to, but something in Rivera's tone stopped him. She was not boasting. She was simply stating facts as if discussing the weather or shipping schedules. Captain Rivera, I must protest. One ship cannot. Admiral, we have 73 minutes until contact. I suggest we both use that time to prepare our crews rather than debating tactics. The Indomitable is moving to position. We will be ready when the swarm arrives. The screen went dark before Corvin could respond. He stared at it for a long moment, then turned to his tactical officer. Let them go. Mark their position and adjust our formations accordingly. And get me a full sensor sweep of that ship. I want to know what we are dealing with. Over the next hour, as the Indomitable moved into position ahead of the fleet, Corvin received reports that made less sense the more he read them. The human ship was massive, yes, but the power readings coming from it were impossible. Its reactor output exceeded his entire dreadnought squadron combined. Its weapon systems used technologies that the Council's scientists had theorized about, but never successfully implemented. Energy shields that rotated through multiple frequencies, point defense lasers with ranges that exceeded most ships' main batteries. And the main cannon, if the sensors were reading correctly, drew enough power to light an entire planet. Admiral, we are receiving similar reports from the other fleet commanders, his operations officer said. Everyone wants to know what this ship is. The Pelian Confederacy is requesting we demand a full technical briefing. They are concerned the humans have developed weapons technology they have not shared with the Council. Later, Corvin growled, we have more immediate concerns. Ambassador Thalessa appeared on his communication screen, her insectoid features drawn with worry. Admiral Corvin, is it true? The human ship is going to face the swarm alone? It appears so, Ambassador. Though I assure you we will not abandon them. The moment the Indomitable is engaged, our fleet will provide support fire and— That ship has 50,000 life signs aboard it, Thalessa said softly. I just received the scan results. Admiral, there are 50,000 humans on that vessel. If they are destroyed, it will be the single greatest loss of human life in their history. Why would they do this? Corvin had no answer for her. He simply closed the channel and turned back to the tactical display, watching the countdown timer tick down toward 0. Around him, his crew worked in silence, preparing weapons and shields, running final checks on every system. They were professionals who had trained for this moment their entire lives. They were ready, but were the humans? Contact in 10 minutes, his sensor officer announced. Detecting the swarm at the edge of the system, adjusting display. The view screen showed space itself seeming to boil with movement. The Vrexian swarm was not a fleet in any traditional sense. It was a living organism, 15,000 bioships that moved as one entity, guided by a single shared consciousness. Each ship was grown rather than built, a creature of chitin and acid and rage that existed only to consume and expand. They had no fear, no hesitation, no mercy. They simply came and consumed everything in their path. Corvin had seen recordings of swarm attacks. He had watched worlds burn and fleets die. He knew what was coming. But knowing and experiencing were two different things, and as the swarm filled his view screen, he felt cold fear settle into his chest. All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Corvin. Prepare to engage on my mark. Hold your positions and trust in your training. For the Kelrath, for the galaxy, for everyone depending on us. Stand ready. Acknowledgements flooded in from 3,000 ships, captains pledging their loyalty and readiness. Then cutting through all other channels came Captain Rivera's voice, calm and clear. Indomitable to all ships, we are moving forward to engage. Maintain your positions until we call for support. We will handle the vanguard. Corvin watched in horror as the massive human ship accelerated, moving away from the fleet directly toward the swarm. It should have looked like a suicide run, and perhaps it was. But something about the way the Indomitable moved, the confidence in its acceleration, made Corvin wonder. The swarm detected the approaching ship and responded as it always did. The bioship surged forward, a wave of organic death racing to meet the lone human vessel. 15,000 against 1. It was not a battle. It was an execution. They are opening fire, the sensor officer whispered, and the galaxy learned what humanity had brought to war. The first shot from the Indomitable was fire and fury made real, a projectile no larger than a human fist launched from one of the ship's railguns and accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed in less than a second. It struck the leading Vrexian bioship and simply erased it from existence. The kinetic energy was so enormous that the bioship did not explode or break apart. It just stopped being, converted from matter into expanding plasma and debris. But the swarm had 15,000 ships, and one destroyed meant nothing to them. They continued their advance, spreading out to surround the lone human vessel. On the eternal vigilance, Fleet Admiral Corvin watched his tactical display with the sick certainty of watching someone about to die. Then the Indomitable truly opened fire, and everything changed. Railguns along the ship's entire length began firing in a pattern too fast for organic eyes to follow. Each shot traveled at velocities that made them nearly impossible to track, and each shot killed. The Vrexian bioships, creatures that had evolved armor capable of regenerating from most energy weapons, had no defense against solid projectiles moving at such speeds. They punched through hulls, through internal structures, through the pilot creatures themselves and out the other side, often striking multiple ships with a single round. But that was just the beginning. Point defense laser grids activated across the Indomitable's hull, creating spheres of coherent light that boiled away anything that entered them. Smaller Vrexian ships attempting to close for boarding simply ceased to exist as they crossed invisible boundaries, their organic hulls unable to withstand the concentrated energy. Larger ships made it closer but were systematically carved apart, piece by piece. Like surgeons removing tumors, missile pods opened along the Indomitable's flanks, and thousands of small projectiles launched into space. Corvin's sensors officer tried to track them and gave up after a few seconds. Admiral, they are using smart munitions. Each missile has its own guidance system and is hunting independently. They are operating in coordinated groups, targeting weak points in the bioship's structure. Corvin watched as clusters of missiles swarmed individual Vrexian ships like predatory insects, striking at joints and sensory organs, crippling them before destroying them. It was efficient in a way that was almost beautiful, if one could forget that each explosion represented a living creature dying. The swarm, massive as it was, began to adjust. The bioships that had spread out now converged, throwing everything at the human vessel from all directions. Thousands of them swarmed in, accepting devastating losses to get close enough to use their acid weapons and boarding pods. The Indomitable began taking hits, its shields flaring bright white as they absorbed acidic projectiles that would have melted through any other ship's hull. Then the main cannon fired, and Corvin understood why the power readings had seemed impossible. A beam of concentrated energy lanced out from the Indomitable's bow, and where it touched, Bioship simply stopped existing. The beam swept across the swarm like a farmer scything wheat, carving a corridor of absolute destruction 500 kilometers long. When it finally powered down after 3 seconds, over 400 Vrexian ships had been reduced to atoms. "Blessed ancestors," Corvin's tactical officer whispered. "What kind of weapon is that?" But the swarm was vast and the Indomitable was alone. The bioships that survived the initial onslaught pressed their advantage, swarming from all vectors. They accepted terrible losses to get close enough to grapple with the human ship. Boarding pods, living missiles filled with Vrexian warriors, began striking the Indomitable's hull. Dozens, then hundreds of them latched on and burned through the outer armor. The defenders watching from the fleet fell silent. They had all seen this before. Once the Vrexian warriors boarded a ship, it was over. The creatures were deadly in close combat, capable of ripping through armored bulkheads with their claws. They could survive in vacuum for hours. They felt no fear and no pain. Ship after ship had been taken this way. Entire crews slaughtered in their own corridors. "Indomitable, this is Fleet Admiral Corvin," he transmitted. "You are being boarded. Request immediate support. We are moving fleet elements forward to provide covering fire for evacuation." Captain Rivera's face appeared on his screen, and Corvin was shocked to see she was smiling. Not a cruel smile, not a mad one, but the calm smile of someone who had expected exactly this situation. "Negative, Admiral. Remain in position. We have the situation under control. Captain, you do not understand. The Vrexians are inside your ship. You need to evacuate now before—" "Admiral, I appreciate your concern, but we designed the Indomitable to fight while being boarded. In fact, we expected it. Please observe." Rivera gestured, and suddenly Corvin's screens filled with internal camera feeds from the Indomitable. What he saw made no sense. The boarding pods had indeed penetrated the hull, and Vrexian warriors were pouring into the ship's corridors. But instead of finding terrified crew members running for escape pods, they found something else entirely. They found soldiers. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers waiting for them. The interior of the Indomitable was not like any ship Corvin had ever seen. Every corridor was a defensive position. Every intersection had firing positions built into the walls. Every section was designed to be sealed off and defended independently. And in those corridors stood humans in heavy combat armor, carrying weapons that looked like they belonged in ground warfare, not space combat. The first Vrexian warriors to emerge from their boarding pods died instantly, cut down by concentrated fire from multiple positions. Those that followed tried to spread out but found themselves channeled into predetermined kill zones, where overlapping fields of fire gave them no cover. The creatures that had terrified the galaxy were being systematically slaughtered in the Indomitable's corridors. Corvin watched as a squad of human soldiers worked together with frightening efficiency. They communicated in short, clipped phrases, moving with practiced coordination. One would throw a grenade around a corner, forcing the Vrexians to scatter. Another would advance with a heavy weapon, laying down suppressive fire. A third would flank from a side corridor, catching the creatures in a crossfire. It was brutal, efficient, and utterly ruthless. "How?" Corvin asked, not really expecting an answer. "How is this possible?" On his screen, Rivera's smile faded, replaced by something sadder. "Admiral, we have 50,000 personnel aboard the Indomitable. Do you know how many of them are what you would call regular ship's crew? About 5,000. Engineers, maintenance, command staff, support personnel. The other 45,000 are soldiers. Marines, combat engineers, special operations teams. This ship is not just a warship. It is a mobile fortress that happens to operate in space. But why? Corvin could not understand. Why build a ship this way? Why expect to be boarded? Because we studied your wars, Admiral. We reviewed every engagement the galaxy has fought in the last 1,000 years. We saw how the swarm operates, how they board vessels and overwhelm crews that were never trained or equipped for close combat. We decided we would not die that way. Every human ship of the line is built like this. Every crew member is trained for combat. We learned from your losses and we adapted. On the screens, the battle inside the Indomitable continued. More boarding pods struck the hull, but each one became a tomb for the Vrexians inside. The human soldiers were not just fighting defensively. In some sections, they were pursuing the boarders, hunting them through the ship's corridors like predators stalking prey. Corvin watched a human soldier take a hit that would have killed most species, the Vrexian warrior's claw tearing through his armor. The human fell, but two of his comrades immediately moved to cover him, dragging him back while laying down suppressive fire. Another soldier moved forward to take his position, and the line never wavered. They fought like a single organism, each individual part working in perfect synchronization with the whole. Outside the ship, the swarm continued to press its attack, but it was dying. The Indomitable's external weapons never stopped firing, and the tactical display showed the bio-ship count dropping steadily. 15,000 had become 12,000, then 10,000. The railguns fired with metronomic regularity, each shot a death sentence. The missile swarms found targets and eliminated them with ruthless efficiency. The laser grids carved spheres of death through which nothing could pass. And still the swarm came because the swarm knew no other way. They threw themselves at the human ship with suicidal determination, and the Indomitable killed them all. Every bio-ship that approached died. Every boarding party was massacred. The humans fought with a cold, calculating efficiency that was terrifying to witness. Corvin realized he was gripping the arms of his command chair hard enough to hurt. Around him, his crew stared at the displays in silent awe. The other fleet commanders were transmitting requests for information, for clarification, for some explanation of what they were witnessing. But Corvin had no answers for them. He only knew one thing with absolute certainty. Humanity had not sent one ship as an insult or as a token gesture. They had sent one ship because one ship was enough. And as he watched the swarm die against the Indomitable's weapons, hours passed and the battle continued. Fleet Admiral Corvin had stopped trying to understand what he was watching and simply observed, marking details that his tactical mind recognized as significant, even if his emotions could not process them. The Indomitable fought like nothing he had ever encountered, and as the engagement wore on, more of its capabilities became apparent. The ship's energy shields operated on principles that Council scientists had theorized about but dismissed as impractical. They cycled through multiple frequencies every few seconds, making it nearly impossible for the Vrexian acid weapons to find a consistent weak point to exploit. When a shield section took too much damage, it simply redistributed power from other sections, maintaining coverage across the entire hull without ever creating a vulnerable gap. The weapon system showed similar adaptability. Corvin watched as the Indomitable's targeting computers tracked thousands of individual bioships simultaneously, prioritizing targets based on threat level and position. Smaller ships trying to flank were eliminated by point defense. Larger ships attempting to absorb fire while others closed were destroyed by the railguns. Any bioship trying to deploy additional boarding pods was marked for immediate termination by missile swarms. They are using artificial intelligence, Corvin's operations officer said, her voice filled with wonder and fear. Admiral, those targeting solutions are being calculated faster than any organic mind could process. They must have AI systems managing their weapons grid. The Council banned AI weapons systems, someone else said. After the machine wars, we agreed they were too dangerous. The humans were not part of the Council during the machine wars, Corvin replied. And clearly they made different choices than we did. Inside the ship, the situation was equally revelatory. The human soldiers continued to defend every corridor, every junction, every meter of their vessel with unwavering determination. But it was not mindless determination. Corvin watched as squads adapted their tactics based on how the Vrexians responded, setting traps and ambushes that accounted for the creatures' enhanced senses and physical capabilities. In one section, a team of human engineers sealed off a compromised deck and vented it to space, killing dozens of Vrexian boarders instantly. In another, soldiers used the ship's internal sensors to track enemy movements through the walls, then fired their weapons through the bulkheads to hit targets they could not even see. The Indomitable had been designed as a killing ground, and the humans knew every advantage its layout provided. Captain Rivera opened a channel to the fleet, and this time her face showed signs of strain. There was a cut above her left eye, and her uniform was stained with what might have been blood. But her voice remained steady. Fleet Admiral Corvin, We are opening internal camera access to all Allied vessels. I believe it is important that you understand what you are seeing. The screens throughout the Eternal Vigilance filled with feeds from inside the Indomitable. But these were not the combat feeds Corvin had been watching. These showed something else entirely. Damage control teams working to repair hull breaches while fighting continued 3 decks away. Medical personnel treating wounded soldiers in makeshift field hospitals. Engineers rerouting power systems around damaged sections. Commanders coordinating defensive efforts across the entire vessel. And everywhere, humans working together with a level of coordination that seemed almost supernatural. They did not panic when sections of the ship were breached. They did not run when the Vrexians broke through to critical areas. They simply adjusted, adapted, and continued fighting. This is not how galactic species wage war. Ambassador Thalessa's voice came through on a private channel to Corvin. Admiral, I am watching these feeds from our evacuation centers. My people are seeing what the humans are doing. This level of violence, this acceptance of casualties, it is not normal. Corvin understood what she meant. Most galactic species had evolved on worlds less harsh than Earth. They had developed space travel before they had truly mastered warfare. They fought battles expecting to minimize losses, to preserve their forces, to seek diplomatic solutions before things became truly desperate. They thought of war as something unfortunate that sometimes happened, not as something fundamental to existence. The humans were different. They fought like war was simply another problem to be solved, like engineering a bridge or calculating an orbital trajectory. There was no hesitation, no doubt, just cold professional competence applied to the business of killing. Captain Rivera, Corvin transmitted, I need to understand. Why did you design your ships this way? Why train your crews for this level of combat? Rivera was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight of sadness. Admiral, do you know what Earth is like? Our world has a gravity 20% higher than the galactic standard. Our atmosphere is dense and aggressive. Our weather systems produce storms that would destroy settlements on most council worlds. We have predators that can kill a human in seconds. We have microorganisms that cause plagues. We have natural disasters that wipe out entire cities. She paused, and the camera angle shifted to show a wider view of the Indomitable's bridge. Every station was manned, every operator working with focused intensity. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. And then, when we developed intelligence, we turned that aggression on each other. For 10,000 years, Admiral, we fought. Tribe against tribe, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. We got very, very good at killing each other. That is tragic, Corvin said quietly. It is, Rivera agreed, but it is also what made us what we are. When we finally reached the stars and joined the Galactic Council, we studied your history. We learned about the wars you had fought, the casualties you had taken, the way you approached conflict, and we were horrified. Horrified? By our wars? By your casualty rates, Admiral. We reviewed the Battle of Korvax 7. 12,000 ships engaged the Slavan hegemony. 8,000 were destroyed. Millions of crew members dead. We analyzed the tactics used, and we realized that most of those deaths were preventable. Ships were deployed without adequate point defense. Crews were not trained for damage control under fire. No one expected to be boarded, so no one was prepared for it. You fought like species that had never truly learned how to kill efficiently. The words stung, but Corvin could not argue with them. The Battle of Korvax 7 was studied in every military academy as an example of determined heroism in the face of overwhelming odds. But it was also a nightmare of poor preparation and inadequate training. We decided, Rivera continued, that if we were going to fight alongside you, we would not fight like you. We would build ships that could survive damage that would destroy yours. We would train crews that could operate in conditions that would kill yours. We would develop weapons that could handle threats you could not because we thought we were better than you, but because we could not stand the thought of watching our allies die in battles we knew how to win. On the tactical display, the swarm count had dropped below 5,000. The Indomitable was damaged now, visible scarring across its hull where boarding pods had breached and where acid weapons had eaten through armor, but it was still fighting, still killing, still advancing slowly through the mass of bioships like a shark, moving through a school of fish. We sent one ship, Rivera said, because we knew one ship would be enough. Every human vessel is built to fight outnumbered. Every crew is trained to face impossible odds. We do not send fleets because we learned something on Earth that the rest of the galaxy never had to. We learned that numbers do not matter if you are willing to be more ruthless, more efficient, more determined than your enemy. That sounds like arrogance, Corvin said, though without heat. Perhaps it is, Rivera admitted, but we prefer to think of it as responsibility. You asked us to help defend the Kelrath system. We could have sent a fleet, dozens of ships like the Indomitable, and crushed the swarm with overwhelming force. But that would have been wasteful. Why send 50 ships when one will accomplish the mission? Why risk 50 crews when one is sufficient? The main cannon fired again, and another corridor of destruction appeared in the swarm. The bioships were thinning now, their numbers reduced to a point where they could no longer coordinate effectively. The hive mind that guided them was fragmenting, losing coherence as too many nodes were destroyed. Besides, Rivera added, and now there was something like humor in her voice, we wanted to see if our theories were correct. We have never fought a major engagement before. All our designs, all our training, it was based on analysis and simulation. We needed to know if what we built actually worked. You used the defense of the Kelrath system as a test? Corvin was not sure whether to be angry or impressed. We used it as a learning experience, Rivera corrected, and we are learning a great deal. For instance, our boarding defense protocols work even better than expected. Our energy shields need some refinement in the frequency cycling routine. And our main cannon is exceeding projected performance by 12%. This data will be invaluable for designing our next generation of ships. Corvin shook his head in amazement. The end came not with a dramatic final explosion, but with a gradual silence as the last Vrexian bioships were systematically eliminated. 18 hours after the battle began, the Indomitable fired its final shot, a railgun projectile that destroyed the last surviving bioship as it tried to flee back into deep space. The void around Kelrath Prime was filled with debris, the organic remains of 15,000 ships drifting in expanding clouds. The Indomitable hung in space, scarred and damaged but intact. Sections of its hull glowed red where boarding pods had burned through. Entire weapon batteries were dark and offline. Atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches, creating thin plumes of frozen air that sparkled in the starlight. But the ship's power signature remained strong, its engines still operational, its remaining weapons still online and tracking for targets. Fleet Admiral Corvin sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display that showed 3,000 Allied ships that had never fired a single shot. His fleet had maintained position throughout the entire engagement, weapons ready, crews alert, but ultimately unnecessary. The humans had done exactly what Captain Rivera said they would do. They had handled the vanguard. They had faced the swarm alone and won. "Get me a casualty report from the Indomitable," he said quietly. His communications officer worked for a moment, then looked up with an expression Corvin could not read. "Admiral, Captain Rivera is transmitting a general report to all fleet commanders now." Rivera appeared on the screen, and she looked exhausted. The cut above her eye had been treated, but new injuries were visible. Her uniform was torn in places, and there was a weariness in her eyes that spoke of hours of constant battle. But she still stood straight, still commanded attention. "To all Allied fleet commanders, this is Captain Elena Rivera of the Indomitable. The Vrexian swarm has been eliminated. We count 0 hostile contacts remaining in the system. The Kelrath system is secure." She paused and something flickered across her face. "We have taken casualties. 47 crew members killed in action, 133 wounded, 24 of those in critical condition. Our medical teams are working to stabilize all wounded personnel, 47 dead. Out of 50,000 crew members, 47 had died defending against the greatest threat the galaxy had faced in centuries." Corvin did not know whether to laugh or cry at the absurdity of it. The Council's projections had suggested 40 to 60% casualties across the entire fleet. That would have meant hundreds of thousands of deaths. Instead, 47 humans had died and the battle was won. "The Indomitable is damaged but operational," Rivera continued. "We require repair facilities and resupply, but we can maintain defensive operations if the swarm has additional forces in the region. We are transmitting full tactical reports to all fleet commanders for analysis. Captain Rivera out." The screen went dark and Corvin's bridge was silent. No one spoke. No one seemed to know what to say. They had just witnessed something that should not have been possible, and the implications were too vast to immediately process. It was Ambassador Thalessa who broke the silence, her image appearing on Corvin's personal screen. The insectoid ambassador's wings were trembling, but not with fear this time. "Admiral, my people are requesting permission to send aid to the Indomitable. Medical supplies, repair materials, whatever they need. We owe them everything." "Granted," Corvin said automatically, then had to clear his throat. "Granted. Coordinate with Captain Rivera, and Ambassador, when you speak with her, please convey the gratitude of the entire fleet." Over the next hours, the magnitude of what had occurred became clearer. The Indomitable had engaged and destroyed 15,000 bioships with a single vessel. The humans had pioneered weapons technologies that the Council had believed were decades away from practical implementation. They had demonstrated tactical capabilities that rendered traditional fleet combat strategies obsolete. And they had done it all while taking casualties so minimal that it seemed like a rounding error. Ships from across the fleet began sending delegations to the Indomitable, requesting permission to observe the damage, to understand the technology, to learn from what the humans had accomplished. Rivera granted most requests with the caveat that her crew needed time to conduct repairs and tend to their wounded. Corvin went himself, taking a shuttle to the massive human ship. As they approached, the true scale of the damage became apparent. Entire sections of the hull had been breached. Weapon emplacements were melted slag. Armor plating was buckled and torn. The ship had taken a beating that would have destroyed any other vessel in the fleet, and yet it had survived and kept fighting. They docked at one of the few intact airlocks, and a human officer met them. Lieutenant Commander Okafor, according to his name tag, a young man with dark skin and tired eyes. "Admiral Corvin, welcome aboard the Indomitable. Captain Rivera is in the main medical bay, but she asked me to give you a tour of the ship." As they walked through the corridors, Corvin saw human crew members everywhere, working to repair damage, tending to wounded comrades, cleaning up the aftermath of the boarding actions. The walls were scarred with weapons fire and acid burns. Some sections were still sealed off, too dangerous to enter without protective equipment. And everywhere there were signs of the brutal close-quarters fighting that had raged through the ship. But what struck Corvin most was the calm efficiency with which the humans worked. There was grief, certainly. He saw crew members pausing to touch names on memorial walls, to offer quiet support to mourning friends. But there was no panic, no trauma that paralyzed them. They grieved and then returned to work because work needed to be done. "Lieutenant Commander," Corvin asked as they walked, "how do your people do this? How do you fight this way and then simply continue as if nothing happened?" Okafor was quiet for a moment. "It is not that nothing happened, Admiral. 47 of our friends died today. We will remember every one of them. We will honor their sacrifice, but we also understand that war requires this of us. We train for it. We prepare for it. We accept it as part of the reality of what we do. But the violence, the casualties, how do you cope?" "We support each other," Okafor said simply. "Every crew member knows that everyone else would die to protect them. We are not just colleagues or shipmates. We are family. When one of us falls, the rest of us carry on because that is what they would want. We do not fight alone, Admiral. We never fight alone." They reached the medical bay, and Corvin saw Captain Rivera standing beside a bed where a young human lay unconscious, bandages covering most of his torso. She was holding his hand, speaking softly to him even though he could not hear. When she noticed Corvin, she gently placed the young man's hand on the bed and walked over. "Admiral Corvin, thank you for coming. This is Ensign Martinez." He held a choke point single-handedly for 20 minutes, while his squad evacuated wounded. He killed 37 Brexians before he collapsed. "He will recover." "I am glad," Corvin said, and meant it. "Captain, I need to understand. Why did you really send only one ship?" "The truth, not the tactical justifications." Rivera looked at him for a long moment, then gestured for him to follow her to a viewport. They stood together, looking out at the debris field that had been the swarm. "The truth, Admiral, is that we could not bear to see what was going to happen. We analyzed the battle projections. We knew what the casualty rates would be if the fleet engaged the swarm conventionally. Hundreds of thousands dead, maybe more. Young people from dozens of species dying because they were not prepared for the kind of enemy they faced." She turned to face him directly. "We sent one ship because we knew one ship could win. But more than that, we sent one ship because we wanted your people to live. The Zorathians, the Pelians, the Kelrath, all of them. They are our allies, our friends. We could not stand by and watch them die in a battle we knew how to fight. So you took all the risk yourselves, Corvin said. It was not risk for us. It was duty. We are the ones who know how to fight this kind of war. We are the ones who have the weapons, the training, the mentality. If we had held back and let others die when we could have prevented it, we would not have been able to live with ourselves. Corvin felt something shift in his understanding of humans. He had thought their single ship was arrogance or perhaps some kind of test. But it was neither. It was sacrifice. They had put themselves in harm's way so others would not have to. They had taken all the risk, all the casualties, all the burden, because they believed it was their responsibility to do so. The Galactic Council needs to discuss what happened here today, Corvin said. Everything has changed. Yes, Rivera agreed, it has. But Admiral, we did not do this to prove we are superior to other species. We did it because we are different. Earth made us different. Our history made us different. We learned how to kill efficiently because we had no choice. Now we can use that knowledge to protect instead of destroy. The Council will want to put your military in charge of galactic defense, Corvin said. We know. Admiral Chen is already preparing proposals. But we want to be clear about something. We do not want command because we seek power. We want it because we can save lives.